Any questions on the things that we've seen just now in this passage?
Yeah, so like if you do get like a huge like super science like heavy like, passage like this on like the SAT, like how would you um like cuz since it has like a bunch of terminology that I'm not really like familiar with, how do you like make sure to not like get overwhelmed by it?
Yeah. How do you do that? So one of the tips that I had recommended is not to allow yourself to get focused on the detail. They don't actually care what this stuff is called often, right? They're not testing you on the names. They're not testing you on the actual biological principles. They may ask about patterns or time sequence or cause and effect sequence or like purpose, like what assumption that the authors of the text use, and that might have some technicality to it. But if I use the general outline of the passage, I can go back and find that detail. I don't have to remember it or understand it, right? Like I don't understand how photosynthesis works. I will not pretend to be a chemist. I don't understand how chemistry or bio. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a biologist. I have only the foggiest, faintest idea of how that stuff works, but I can understand what they're doing here because I'm just looking at the broad principles. They use photosynthesis or they use sunlight to power something, and that thing turns stuff into energy.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense. So like try like instead of like getting caught up with like the names, like try just like think about the general idea.
Right. Like I'm dumbing it down to my own level.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
what are they doing with that energy? They're going to make medicine. And they say the names of the medicine, but again, I'm not a pharmacist. I won't pretend to be. I know what medicine is. So they use sunlight to create energy, and they use that energy to make medicine. The how of it, who knows? It's magic. Magic and robots. That's right. So don't get intimidated
Yeah.
by the terminology. And this applies to the history passages as well. If you're going through a history document, which are often harder to understand, like 1958, 1960, and they're talking about a lot of political stuff. They're talking a lot about philosophy and ideologies and like how human behavior works and who knows what. But I'm not going to bog myself down with the technicalities of it. I'm just going to say, like, let's just do it. I'll read this passage out loud and translate it for you. Does that seem like a good use of time, Sachir?
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you the insight into the inner workings of my brain here. Okay, it does
Okay.
look like it's just this one page. Let's get that all onto one page. So, wow, look at the size of that introductory paragraph. They're giving us a lot of background here, so let's tear into that. I don't care what that guy's name is. South African Congress of Democrats. Okay, so we're in South Africa, delivered in 1958. I have the advantage of being older, and I know that in South Africa in 1958 there was this thing called apartheid. Have you guys learned about that in your history classes yet?
No.
Apartheid is basically like segregation,
Okay.
but worse. Uh, this other guy is addressing South African Parliament, delivered in 1960, so around the same time. Is the process of transitioning from British colony to independent republic under white minority rule. No, there it is. They tell you it. There you go.
Oh.
Was president of African National Congress, a group advocating equality for Black South Africans. So it has this white minority rule, and now we're working towards equality. Perfect. And this guy Luthuli was the president of the organization trying to push for equality. So we can already make some assumptions about what this guy's beliefs and arguments might be. Macmillan, on the other hand, was the Prime Minister of Britain, addressing an all-white South African Parliament. So he's going to probably be the opposition, you
Mm-hmm.
might imagine.
Yeah.
So with that foundation, let's go through it. Those of us who are in freedom, in the freedom struggle in this country, have really only one gospel. We may possibly shade it in different ways, but the gospel of democracy and freedom. But it is different. So those of us who are in the freedom struggle in this country have one gospel, and it's the gospel of democracy and freedom. We fight for democracy and freedom. That's my translation of that.
Okay.
We're in a struggle of freedom, democracy, and freedom. If we are true to South Africa, that must be our vision. A vision of South Africa as a fully democratic country. So that's the principle. It cannot, in honesty, be claimed that she is yet really democratic. So she is not really democratic yet, when only a third of her people enjoy democratic rights. So it's unequal, and we are not equal until everyone gets it. Notwithstanding the fact that constitute the majority. So even though we are the majority, we do not have freedom and subject to apartheid rule. I emphasize the words are still because I do not believe firmly that it is not a state that can be perpetuated. Apartheid rule is the antithesis of democracy. So apartheid is the opposite of democracy. It is an effort to make Africans march back to tribalism. So it's backwards. Making sense so far?
Yeah.
So we need to seek democracy and freedom. We cannot have a truly free or democratic country until we have equality and freedom. Even though Africans are in the majority, apartheid keeps us going back towards tribalism and not towards democracy. So we must get rid of apartheid, is I guess the argument that's coming. Very nice and pretty phrases are used to justify the diversion of the democratic road. So people say nice things, but they're not actually doing democracy. This diversion from democracy. The one that comes to mind is a suggestion that Africans will develop along our own lines. I do not know any people who really have developing along their own lines. We are told that we do this thing, but I don't know anybody who does it, he says. My fellow white South Africans enjoy what is called Western civilization. Should be the first to agree that the civilization is indebted to previous civilization. For its heritage, Western civilization is really indebted to many sources, both ancient and modern. So he's saying all of this stuff doesn't matter. White South Africans enjoy civilization. That's it. The rest of it, who cares? Not important. The essence of development along your own lines is that you must have the right to develop and the right to determine how you develop. Its essence is freedom, and beyond freedom, self-determination. This is the vision for our future and our development. This is a nothing burger of a statement. One might ask, it is the vision of a democratic society. Is this vision of democratic society South Africa realizable? Is it realistic? So he's asking, now that I've stated out this vision that we must have not only democracy, but the right and the agency to determine our own democracy, is it realistic? Here's a big pivot in focus here. Is it merely mirage? I say it is realizable or realistic. For it is in the nature of man to yearn to struggle for freedom. So it's a human nature to yearn for freedom. The germ of freedom is in everyone has it. In fact, the history of mankind, he's using germ here as the seed. The seed of freedom is in every human individual. That's actually what the Latin word germ means. To germinate, to spread germ is to spread seeds. In fact, the history of mankind is the history of man struggling and striving for freedom. He says that it's a historical fact that people struggle towards freedom. Apex of human achievement is freedom, not slavery. Human being struggles to reach that aspect. What did we just read? There are only two parts, really. South Africa must fight for democracy, and South Africans must be given the right to choose how they do that. It is human nature to fight for democracy. That is it. That is the entire passage.
Oh, wow.
Passage 1. He will become fully democratic when black South Africans have the same rights as white citizens. Yeah, seems pretty good. Is it about economics at all? No. Form their own political organizations? No. Constitute a majority? They already are the majority. No. Right? If we summarize and contextualize the text as we read it, we're going to be in a much better position to do well on these questions. Hey, look, very nice and pretty phrases. Primarily to show that the language being used is in order to, I underlined that. Sometimes very nice and pretty phrases are used to justify the diversion from the democratic road. So people say nice things to distract us. It's not to rectify the intelligence. To rectify means to correct. No. To obscure, yes. To undermine, no. Depict the daily experience, no. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. When describes again, I'm not even trying to say the name. Who cares? When the author describes the vision of democratic society as realizable, realistic, right? He means that the vision can be achieved. Pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
Do it for passage 2. You're on your own for this one. And one thing that I will point out that I was doing as I went along is I wasn't waiting to the end of the paragraph to summarize. I was comprehending every time he made a claim, I tried to connect it to the overall theme and purpose. What is the purpose of this person? Remember that passage 2 is going to be written from the perspective of the British Prime Minister, who probably doesn't want to lose a colony. So he's probably going to argue that you South Africans, we're taking care of things. You've got it good here. We might actually see some examples of the very nice and pretty phrases. I'm just anticipating this. Who knows? Maybe the prime minister is going to be saying, yeah, you guys got it terrible. Let's give it up. Give you guys equality. That could be the case, but I doubt it. Go ahead and read through that. Summarize as you go along, and we'll see how you do this time.